next item, I'm really interested in this, is looking forward to it, is Simon Hanna. Hi. I've seen a few weeks back a Facebook post of Simon's where he referenced a film I'd never heard of called In Time. And he asked, is this the most Marxist film ever? What? Looks totally like an action thriller, Netflix. It's out there. It's got Cillian Murphy, it's got Amanda Seyfried, it's got Justin Timberlake in the main roles, etc. So it's a really big blockbuster, and I'd never even heard of it, and I don't think many people have. So Simon, thanks very much for coming along. Before we get started, so I thought we show quickly the trailer because it does give a bit of an insight into what this film is all about.
Something to have more time in my hand than hours in the day. Where's the rest?
Never met the quota.
My units are up from last week.
So is the quota.
2 hours.
It's always been an hour.
Now it's 2. Price went up.
It's a 2-hour walk. I have an hour and a half.
Then you better run.
The poor are meant to die. It's how the system works. What the hell's that supposed to mean?
You really don't know, do you? How old are you in real time?
28.
I'm 105. The truth is, there's more than enough time for everyone. There are men with 1 million years while most live day to day. For a few to be immortal, many must die.
No one should be immortal if even one person has to die.
You're not from around here, are you?
Why would you doubt that?
You're a little different.
Come with me.
The cameras picked up suspicious behavior.
His name is Will Salas.
He shouldn't be there.
What are we gonna do? Steal?
Is it stealing if it's already stolen? I'm gonna make them pay. Come on, help yourselves!
Take the time, it's free.
Where did you get that?
We can't have 1,000 years in the wrong hands. It could cripple the system.
I will stop him.
The problem is, everybody wants to live forever.
We're not meant to live forever.
You know we're coming to get you. Let's hope so.
His crime wasn't taking time. He was giving it away.
So that looked like an action thriller, didn't it, mainly? Explain to us then, please, how does it make it a Marxist film, you think?
Okay, thanks, Tina. Yeah, I'll give a kind of like 15-minute kind of introductory presentation, and then we can have a discussion about it. So, and thanks for inviting me to give the talk. It just goes to show, be careful what you write on Facebook, because someone might see it and then invite you to give a talk and ask you to justify your point. Yes, but I mean, I would start off by saying that when I described it as the most Marxist movie ever, I just want to qualify that statement because you know, it's not a movie about sort of particularly focused around workers as workers and, you know, the kind of classic class struggle that we might understand. Doesn't use the word socialism or, you know, or like all these other things. But I think in terms of the way the movie understands economics and the kind of class struggle that emerges from that economics, I think it is fundamentally you could argue Marxist in its approach. I don't know if the director has ever read Marx or, you know, studied Capital or anything like that, but certainly the way that the concept of time is used in the movie, I think, is Marxist. And as you saw in the trailer, it is also a revolutionary movie. I mean, it's about, you know, the poor versus the rich, and can you have fundamental social radical change which redistributes time. So before I go to talk a bit more about the movie, It's worth noting that the writer and director Andrew Niccol also made the 1998 movie Gattaca, which I would recommend. It's a movie, also a kind of dystopian science fiction movie where it's a society where gene editing has reached the point where there's kind of a class of elite, very privileged, very beautiful, very intelligent people who, you know, have everything they want. They have all these amazing jobs, and they're kind of always getting into spaceships and flying off to other planets to, you know, live in these kind of perfect worlds. And then there's other people whose family couldn't afford the gene editing, who couldn't afford to produce perfect babies, didn't have that opportunity in life, and they kind of create this underclass. And so I think Andrew Niccol's very interested in the way that kind of using science fiction to explore aspects of class and social division. He also wrote The Truman Show. I don't know if people have seen that. It's the Jim Carrey movie. Also came out in the 90s, which is a really excellent film about kind of reality TV, ahead of even the concept of reality TV and the perils of 24/7 celebrity culture, which he won the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay for. So whilst I would say that In Time is not a perfect movie, I think it fits in with Andrew Niccols's way of thinking, or like using film and culture and science fiction ideas to explore issues around alienation, around class, and class struggle. So just to kind of give you a bit more of a background, which hopefully you picked up from the trailer. So in this movie, everyone stops aging at 25. You have this kind of thing in your wrist, which is how much time you have. And so you can get time by working. So Justin Timberlake plays this factory worker, Will, and the movie starts off with him, and he's going and he meets his friend on his way to his shift in this factory, and they want to buy some coffee. So you know, scan your wrist, and the coffee's gone up from 2 minutes to 4 minutes. You know, and they're complaining about inflation and you know, the kind of cost of living crisis, which I'm sure a lot of us will be familiar because of the inflationary crisis that's happened in Britain as well as other parts of the world in the last couple of years. But then he goes to his shift, he does his day's work, and then when he comes out, you get your hours, but he's kind of shortchanged. He's given fewer hours than he thought he was going to get. And as the guy says in the trailer, well, you didn't meet your quota, or, you know, sort of like the quota amount has gone up, and so the amount of time that you receive, which you can then use to live, to pay your rent, to, you know, buy food, to travel around, is reduced. And so you can already see there a very kind of simple understanding of sort of class and the class struggle. Now, whilst people are kind of living and struggling with this arrangement, the rich enjoy lives of wondrous splendor. One even refers to the situation as Darwinian capitalism. He says, well, some people are just rich, some people have got what it takes. You know, they've got like you know, a billion years like on their arms. You know, they can do whatever they want. They kind of, there's one scene where he's kind of gambling, and, you know, he's like gambling 200 years, you know, just as a kind of like a starting bet. And it's kind of this, you know, sort of upping the ante. Whereas obviously most people that Justin Timberlake's character knows, they literally have kind of 23 hours on their arm. So they are paid enough money to get back to work the next day. You know, there's no luxury for them. There's no, you know, there's no sort of anything apart from the absolute basics. So the people that keep this arrangement going are the timekeepers. You can see in the trailer that one of the main ones is played by Cillian Murphy, who just won the Academy Award for playing Oppenheimer in the Christopher Nolan movie that came out last year. And the timekeepers are, you know, police. They act much like the police do in modern capitalist society. They protect property, and then they ensure the status quo is preserved. However, all is not well in this situation. Will comes across this, Will is Justin Timberlake's character, comes across this kind of very disaffected super rich man called Henry Hamilton, who's been alive, as he says in the trailer, for 105 years. He's sick of life. He's bored. You know, he's got so many years on his arm, and it's just, you know, it's brought him this life of luxury, but he's kind of he's very disaffected. He's alienated, and he wants to die basically. So he kind of gives Will all of his time. So Will goes from having 20 hours on the clock to having 116 years on the clock. And obviously then he becomes the target of kind of bandits who rob people and steal their time, and and so on. So I think this is all a very interesting sort of concept of the way that time is used as a commodity to regulate the economy, to regulate production, and to decide who has wealth and who doesn't. I think it's also worth saying, actually, very interesting in the movie, because you can see that the rich have got this kind of very wonderful, abundant life, but they're also quite miserable in a way. Sort of in this world, everything's divided up into different cities, and the poor are in one place, and then the rich are in other cities. But it costs you time to get to the different cities. So, and the time is very expensive. It's like 2 months, like minimum. So obviously, a lot of people don't have that time to travel. So it means that most people never go and see the cities of the rich, let alone buy anything in these cities. But the rich are very, they have huge wealth, but they're very alienated. They're very miserable because they're so rich, they have to live behind these security walls. They're flanked by security and timekeepers. Their movements are tracked and regulated, so no one can steal their time. So they're very rich, but they're not particularly free. They're not particularly able to live their lives as kind of like in genuine humanity in that sense. So anyway, I recommend watching the movie. I'm going to go and talk a little bit now about the concept of time in Marx, because I want to sort of use the cultural thing as a way to talk a bit about the economics. It is worth saying, though, that the movie, it does have a revolutionary message in it, and there is a fight to redistribute the time, to make sure that the time isn't just consolidated in the hands of in the wrists of the super time rich, but is kind of redistributed across society. So I won't tell you what happens at the end, but you can watch the movie around that. So just quickly about the concept of time in Marx. So in Marxism, there is a double meaning of time. There is both the historical concept of time, of course, which we're all familiar with, societies, civilizations, the rise and fall of things like capitalism. So in that sense, time is the medium in which things develop and change, and what you might call the social totality of capitalism takes place. But time is also an object of reification under capitalism. Labor time becomes a commodity that can be used and exploited to extract surplus value from by the capitalists. So, and it's in that double meaning of time that Marx really has a very revolutionary criticism of the system. So they say that time is money. This is a famous quote, but under capitalism, money is also time, because the labor time that workers have in terms of going to work and producing things is a real central battleground of capitalism. It's where we earn the means to live through our wages, but also where bosses extract surplus value that they can use as profit. So the capitalist extracts surplus value from the worker because there is an unequal exchange of labor time between the boss and the workers. So the exploiter can then pocket the difference. So you go into work, you're making things, or you're producing things, you're providing a service, you get paid a certain amount of wages, but obviously you are producing more value than the wages that you are paid. That's where profit comes from. That's where surplus value is so important for Marxism. So bosses can increase absolute surplus value, for instance, by increasing the length of the working day. They can remove rest breaks. They can do any kind of thing that keeps you in work longer. I mean, even in companies like Google, where they pride themselves, they've got like games rooms, and they've got restrooms, and they've got kind of bars and coffee places in the HQ. But that's because they don't really want you to leave the building. They want you to stay in and work as much as you can, even if they try and make it more playful work. But it's still work. They're still trying to increase the working day. And obviously the length of the working day has been a huge battleground for trade unions over the years, as workers, as we fought for the 8-hour day, and now there's people fighting for the 4-day week, and so on. So how is time measured by the capitalist class? And this is where Marx is very different to previous early economists like David Ricardo, because people like Ricardo talked about the concrete labor of any specific individual. So you go in, you make something, and that's your concrete labor. But what Marx is interested in is what he calls the abstract labor, how all workers' time and effort is measured against each other. How do you compare the labor of a teacher with the labour of a nuclear engineer? How do you compare the labour of someone who's tarmacking the road with someone who's printing a book? Like, how do you really compare these different functions that workers perform under capitalism? And this is where Marx's understanding of abstract labour and the way that the value is created by units of time, effectively. And this is obviously where I think In Time is quite a Marxist movie in that sense, because they strip out all the money aspect of it. Like, I mean, money is just kind of congealed labor time, really. And they replace it with just literal time, which you get, which you give, which you use to buy things. But I mean, we can even see that today. Like, if you take a £10 note, which you've got from your wages, and you go to a shop and you buy something, that £10 is the congealed labor time that you put into producing surplus value for someone else. And so like all that money is also just a representation of time in that sense, the time that we have been paid for within the the capitalist kind of wage capitalist the capitalist relations. So yeah, I think that's one of the main things I wanted to say around time. It's it's a means of measuring the exploitation of workers. The fight over surplus value extraction is central to the workers' movement, the trade union struggle, and the fight for the workers and society in general to have control of the surplus is also one of the key aspects of what socialism is. At the moment, the capitalists steal the surplus value from the labor that we produce, from the kind of unpaid hours of our work. And so one of the key things socialism wants to do is take that, which is taken from the workers and reintegrate it into society. Now, in the movie, of course, they do this by literally giving people more time. Under socialism, the reintegration will be the fact that we can decide how the surplus is redistributed in terms of investment or consumption democratically. At the moment, these decisions are not democratic. They are made by capitalists and captains of industry and people like that. But under socialism, we will be able to decide that. So just the final 1 minute, Tina, before you finish, before you wrap me up, I think it's important to consider how time within the workers' movement has also been thought of. So I mentioned the trade union struggles before, but I don't know if some people might know this. During the Paris Commune in the 1870s, one of the first things that workers did was they smashed the clocks, like in the centers of the towns. Why? Because for them, the clocks were there to control their lives. It was to get you up, get you out, get you into work. You're penalized if you're 15 minutes late, sort of. And so the clocks for those workers represented an oppressive tyranny over their lives. And of course, people were working incredibly long hours each week at that point. If anyone's read The Right to be Lazy by Paul Lafargue, which is a really excellent pamphlet, I really recommend it. He talks about, I mean, the title is kind of provocative, but the main argument he's making is that we should move towards a 15-hour week. We can redistribute the work. We can eliminate bullshit jobs, as David Graeber called them, and we can reorganize society according to a rational, ecologically sustainable plan where, yes, we will still have to work. I think, like, I'm not in favor of anti-work things, but like there will still work that needs to be done, but we can reduce the amount of work as much as possible to the bare minimum to free us for more wonderful things with our lives. So social, political, ludic, erotic, recreational activities, which aren't, which are free from just having to go to work, do the 35 or more hours that, people are doing at the moment. So in that sense, I think the concept of time, the fight over time and the revolutionary consequences of how we understand time are very important. And in that sense, I think In Time is it's a pretty Marxist movie. I think it's pretty good.
Thank you very much, Simon. Excellent. It is a very enjoyable film, especially for being a blockbuster. And, there will be lots of moments where you go, ooh, as a Marxist, like, there'll be things like, there seems to be 12 different time zones if I'd seen it right, and the higher up you go, the more expensive it gets to get there. And then there's a dialogue, it's not illegal to change time zones, is it? And then the copper says, it's not illegal, it's just really rare. And you see things, once you have money, it's almost, it's so easy to quadruple, to get 1 billion out of the 100 million you had, etc. You see the richer getting richer, etc. There's quite a few nice quotes in terms of, talking about alienation. The poor die and the rich don't live. I think she says that to him, the Amanda Seyfried, so the rich don't really have a life. They are surrounded by guards. They are stuck in their life, pretty alienated, etc., and feel, they have to protect themselves just to live a little bit. Where I disagree with you slightly is on the redistribution thing. That seems to be something that Marx actually kind of, obviously we don't, the poor, you have to make sure that people don't starve, etc. But for Marx, well, he argued against that, didn't he? That it's not just about redistribution, which people like Lassalle, etc., were arguing, but for him it was who owns the means of production. It's not just about giving it away and the rich still are in charge of everything, how things are produced, etc. We just get all a little bit more, I think. And that kind of that jarred with me a little bit with the film as well, because as you said at the beginning, it's just, two people really making this revolution, isn't it? It's not a mass of people making this revolution. It's those two fucking up the system, basically, and so you don't really have to have a revolution of sorts. You can just sort of flood the market with a lot of time or money in our case, and that would sort of make everything go haywire, and the rich then just oh well, it's done now. The copper says, just put your weapons down, we're not doing this anymore, and you have a sort of a very peaceful revolution. I know it's a film, it's only a film, and he has to bring it to some kind of conclusion. But I think the redistribution, distribution instead of owning the means of production. Do you think there's a slight un-Marxist edge?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think you're right to point that out. That's where it's not. I mean, it understands kind of the redistributionary aspect of it, and it becomes like a Bonnie and Clyde movie where they're raiding banks and they're kind of giving everyone the time and things like that. So I think there's very good arguments there around class and the poor and the rich, and and the dynamics like that. But because it is mainly about raiding banks, it doesn't really deal with necessarily other aspects of, I mean, because Justin Timberlake works in a factory at the beginning of the movie, but then you never see the factory again. So I don't know what happens to the to the factory owners. I guess they're still able to make the money. Well, there's a bit at the end of the movie, because everyone has so much time now, people stop going to work. So I don't know if that indicates there's a more radical thing going to happen in terms of work and things like that. But I think you're right to point out that it doesn't really deal with the ownership question. It just deals mainly with other aspects of it.
And he also might have a touch of the anarchist about him, perhaps. I think there's twice they ask the question, is it stealing if it's already stolen? Which just sounds like, Proudhon, and all property is theft. Or as in Oppenheimer, they put that quote onto Marx. When there were a few people in the cinema, when I was, that's not Marx. Property is theft, it's Proudhon. So, but he might have that touch. But it did remind me of IRA, RAF in Germany, robbing the banks, and then everybody just take your pick of the money. It's free, etc. It's great. It's very good fun. We've got a couple of people now with their hands up, and I'll bring them in. Perhaps they've seen it as well and liked it. It does look at the end sometimes, it looks a bit like a GDR, when they open the borders and everybody just walks into the different time zones. So if that kind of revolution would be possible, unfortunately, I think it'll probably involve a few more guns, etc., and people perhaps not the rich, not just um, dropping their guns, etc. Oh, one thing was interesting, I think, is the role of. I was wondering your view on that. The role of the copper, the Cillian Murphy guy. He is literally almost the only one who battles till the end and tries to catch him. I mean, all the other coppers seem totally alienated and seem to have no great affinity for this system and just sort of stop. I'm not going to jump out of that window to catch this guy. Why do you think Cillian Murphy is that kind of? What's
yeah, I mean, like it's kind of hinted at that he knew the main character's father, and the main character's father was also some kind of revolutionary, because there's bits when Justin Timberlake's character starts talking about, hey, how come the poor don't have any time or whatever, and then he's like, you sound just like your father, and look what happened to him. So like there's some kind of hint of but also it's revealed at the end. Sorry, people like spoilers, but the Cillian Murphy kind of his character came from the poor district. So I guess maybe he's got this kind of buy-in where he kind of hates the people that he came from, and but yeah, I don't know. Like it is interesting, like in any revolutionary situation, how the state starts to fracture, and some of them obviously really double down and do everything to try and prevent the revolutionary change, and others just kind of give up and go home because the balance of forces has turned against the minority, i.e. the bourgeoisie, and the kind of small numbers of security forces that protect them. But yeah, I think that's interesting to kind of wonder what happened in the background with the father and Cillian Murphy's character.
Or maybe Cillian Murphy was an ally of the father, and the father was killed, and then he said, "Okay, that's me and my revolutionary past."
Sounds like you're going to write the prequel, Tina.
We'll get right on to that. Yeah. Okay, we've got the first question.
Well, I haven't seen the film, but from your description, I'm looking at this as a fundamental flaw, and the fact that the rich cities must have people collecting the waste, doing the cooking, looking after the rich. And where are they in the film? Because surely that is a source of the working class uprising. Do they have slaves? Do they have robots? That kind of thing. And also, a lot of what you're describing is the alienation was caught by Buñuel in the discreet charm of bourgeoisie. That movie was very good at achieving that, and more subtly, I think, maybe, than Mr. Nichols.
Do you want to reply, Simon?
Well, yeah. So when Will gets his 116 years, he goes to kind of the rich New Greenwich, it's called. So he goes there, and he kind of checks into the hotel. So you meet the hotel receptionist, but they're quite kind of snooty. And like he's obviously not from around there. And then he speaks to a waitress who works there, and she can also see he's not really from, he's not from money. He's obviously kind of a bit of an interloper. So you do see people, but I mean, I guess it's one of those things where, the workers that are based in these very rich areas, or maybe, like able to commute in, I guess they feel that they, their lives are so dependent on the immediate service provision to the rich that they don't, like, why would they want to? I mean, maybe they have slightly higher wages than the people that work in the factory district. I guess that's the sort of, you do get some sections of the working class, obviously, who identify with the bourgeoisie, and they identify with the system, and they because they don't see an alternative to it, and indeed maybe they are paid a bit more money in order to kind of keep them sweet. Whereas Justin Timberlake's character is definitely from a kind of city that is neglected, really run down, like there's just dead bodies in the street because their time ran out, and sort of so I guess the movie is trying to make the distinction between that kind of the haves and the have-nots in a in a very sort of blunt way, I guess.
The thing about the bank robberies was kind of interesting as well, because the Bolsheviks early on, they robbed a lot of banks and stuff, and they used some of the money to organize. And there's nothing in the film about the need to organize, is there? That seemed a bit missing. You know, there's no mass action. There's no need for a party to take any kind of action. Did that bother you a bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like he didn't have a very clear revolutionary strategy in that sense. It was just two very young, very beautiful people robbing banks and giving time to the other people. So I guess yeah.
It does. I mean, it is interesting that he's the writer also of the Truman story. Truman Show. I didn't even know that. I mean, that is one of the best films of all time. Surely, this is. If anybody hasn't seen it yet, I mean, that would be worth a review as well. Alienation, exploitation, etc. All sorts of issues that are being discussed in the Truman Show is an excellent film. Victor, I think you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in to ask a question? No, put your hand down again. Okay, so we're probably looking at finishing a bit earlier than usual because we haven't got that many questions. But this is a really interesting film, comrades. I urge you to watch it. If anybody would like to make a comment or a contribution, you can still do so. But it is Hollywood films are, of course, I mean, they are, they have to be financed by multimillionaires, etc., by people who have an awful lot of money and, are not probably going to be Marxists or socialists of any kind. But for a Hollywood film, just like Matrix as well, I think somebody mentioned that in the chat. The Matrix is quite a you watch it and you go, whoa, what if this has all just been put on for us? We're not really in charge. There is a facade. You just see the front, and at the back there is something totally different going on. There's people and we think we're in charge, and yet we're just little puppets being exploited, etc. Also a very good film. So you're obviously a film buff. Is that one of your favorite films, or what's your kind of favorite films?
Oh, you put me on the spot now, Tina. I haven't prepared any answers like that. My favorite films. Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think Terminator 2 is pretty good. That's probably the movie I've seen the most. So maybe I have a bit of a tendency towards action.
Which one? Sorry, I didn't catch that. Which one?
Terminator 2.
Terminator 2.
Come on, it's a brilliant film. I've seen that 100 times.
Terminator 2, is that
the film? Yeah.
Jesus. I'll be back. Isn't that one? No.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. I know a quote, but one of the greatest films. Well, I'm glad we caught you doing In Time and not Terminator, because probably where we had a few more differences of opinion.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So thank you very much, comrades. The film is on Netflix. We're not getting paid by Netflix. So if you can see it somewhere else, it's probably on YouTube. No, I did try to find it actually elsewhere. I could not find it anywhere. I think it's just Netflix. I mean, Google it, perhaps. Do you know if it's anywhere else, Simon?
Oh, I mean, not that I would obviously advocate stealing movies, but the movie's been out for 12 years now, so I'm pretty sure you can find it somewhere online if you want to see it. Let's just leave it at that.
Yes, you don't get yourself into trouble. It's definitely got class into trouble by saying, Simon told me to.
Yeah.
It's a very good film anyway. It's very enjoyable. It's not, it does have weaknesses in terms of Marx's theory of revolution, but it is enjoyable, and you'll love it, I think, as socialists. You'll love it. Thank you very much, Simon.